Hi guys, I hope you're all doing really well. So a week or so ago, I dropped a review of both the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the brand new release. But in today's episode, we are ranking all 9 of the Leatherfaces through the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. So firstly, I'm going to give you a little bit of background information about the character and then we will get into my ranking. For my ranking, I'm judging them on how the movie uses the character, the look of the character, and the performance of the character. So Leatherface was originally created by Kim Henkel and Tobe Hooper and made his first appearance in 1974 in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He is loosely based on the real-life killer Ed Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainsfield. Since 1974, Leatherface has been played by 8 different actors, and because of multiple continuities in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, we have also seen different portrayals of him, down to origin story, appearance, and characteristics. The 2 most consistent elements about the character are one, that he uses a chainsaw as his weapon of choice, and he also wears a mask made from human skin. Leatherface is considered to be one of the tallest villains in horror. His height gives him that added level of fear, and he also runs after his victims. He doesn't do a slow walk like Jason or Michael. Just a heads up that as I am ranking all of the killers and talking a little bit more about them, there are going to be spoilers for all 9 of the movies, so if you haven't seen them yet, I would recommend watching the films and then coming back to the episode. Okay, so kicking off this ranking, coming in at the bottom in 9th place is the Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4, The Next Generation. Honestly, there's really not a huge amount that I can say about this Leatherface. Personally, I think he has the worst look out of all the Leatherfaces. He has this long, straggly, tight permed mullet. He also wears a camo jacket now for some reason, and his masks just look really bad, really fake. And I am not kidding you when I say that all this Leatherface does through the movie is cry and scream and make some sort of whiny noise. And I don't think as a movie villain he's very effective. I don't think as the movie's key antagonist he works. He's not scary, he's not intimidating. I personally find his brother Vilma much scarier than this Leatherface. And so much so to the point that he's not just bullied and pushed around by his family members, but in this movie he's actually verbally pushed around by the final girl Jenny, who tells him to sit down. In 8th place we have the Leatherface from 2017's Leatherface. So in the movie Leatherface, we see another one of those continuity changes that I mentioned in the introduction. This acts as a direct prequel to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it also acknowledges the universe of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. And in this film, we see the beginning of the feud between the Sawyer family and the Hartman family. Leatherface is called Jed in this movie, and we first meet him as a young boy who is unable to fulfill his family's wishes by killing people. He's removed from the family as an act of revenge by Sheriff Hartman, and we then later see him as a young adult in a mental institution. But the hook of this movie is that when we meet the group of young adults in the mental institution and they break out and escape, we don't actually know which one of these is our future Leatherface. The movie gives us a blatant red herring in a character who has the same height, build, and mental ineptness as our titular character does. But, in actual fact, the real Leatherface is Jackson, the young, kind, and charming man. And his transformation into Leatherface as we know him just feels like it comes out of nowhere. After being a kind person for years, he becomes the chainsaw-wielding killer that we know in a matter of minutes. He's facially disfigured in a shootout, and this is what triggers the transformation. This happens so quickly that I just struggle to buy into the believability of it, but I will say that the actor who plays him does a really solid job of portraying the stance and mannerisms of Leatherface that we know. Apart from that though, this movie doesn't fully feel like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie to me, and this just doesn't really feel like Leatherface to me. In 7th place we have Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, Leatherface. This for me is one of the most forgettable versions of Leatherface, just as the movie is one of the most forgettable entries in the franchise. But as far as his look goes, he is, for the most part, doing a good job of doing classic Leatherface. He's still wearing the grubby shirt and trousers, like the workman look, and his mask has the patchwork quality to it that Leatherface's mask in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 had. But for some reason, he now has a leg brace that is never explained, and he's also called Junior in this movie. This Leatherface also seems to have lost that man-child element to him that he had in the first 2 movies. In this film, he's much more violent and aggressive, and he's not pushed around by his family as much, and if he is pushed around with them, this Leatherface has no problem with standing up to them physically. But all of that does mean that this Leatherface still has a level of intimidation to him, which is what you want from your movie's villain. It's also alluded to that Leatherface assaults the women that they capture, and he even has a daughter as a result of one of these attacks. This characteristic of Leatherface has never been explored in any of the other movies, and it felt really out of place. Oh, and he can drive now as well, apparently. These new additions do nothing to develop the character and actually just make him more unlikable and a lot less sympathetic. In 6th place is the Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. This is hands down the most dapper looking Leatherface in the franchise, with his suit and tie and his buttonhole flower. The whole movie is steeped in 80s fashion and style, and even Leatherface has caught the 80s style bug. But Leatherface is generally not dapper, so in this film it stands out as unusual. Leatherface's mask in part 2 is different from the original. In the original it was more like an entire face. In this one it's more of a patchwork creation, and you can even see he has, I think it's either ears or mouths running down his chin and down his neck. We discover in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 that Leatherface's real name is Bubba, but this name will never be used again in any of the other movies. So this Leatherface remains the man-child of the original movie, as this was a direct sequel to the original, and he is still verbally and physically pushed around by his family members. But what I enjoy about this film is that this Leatherface shows a little bit of rebellion and a little bit of kickback to his family when he actually hides the final girl Stretch from them and lies to them about killing her. A couple of differences and additions to this character from the original is that despite him remaining a man-child, he does feel more like a bumbling clown than a mentally inept person. And also we see this Leatherface fall in love with the aforementioned Stretch, and we see him display something similar to sympathy and affection for another human being. My biggest issue with this Leatherface though, and what puts him so far down this list, is the annoying as hell shimmying and shaking constantly through the movie. Every time Leatherface is on screen, you can guarantee he will hold his chainsaw above his head and shimmy and shake around with it. It just got to the point where it was so irritating. I will say though that despite having a weaker Leatherface, I do still love this movie. In 5th place we have the Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. What's interesting about this movie is how very early on it becomes clear that this movie sympathises with the Sawyers, and Leatherface ends up becoming almost an anti-hero. This is an interesting take on the character, as we have previously been able to sympathise with him to an extent, but he has never been an anti-hero before. So this movie acts as a direct sequel to the original film, ignoring all the previous movies, and Leatherface is called Jed in this movie, and after surviving a violent and deadly attack on the Sawyer house by local townspeople, he is protected and hidden by Verna Sawyer in the basement of her huge and gorgeous house. I have to say that I'm not a huge fan of the look of this Leatherface. Clothing wise, I think it's pretty consistent with the look of the original Leatherface, but his mask is just terrible. When I first saw it properly in the movie when he's preening fingers in the kitchen, I thought he looked like a cross between the Grand High Witch and Leprechaun, and with his fluffy grey hair sticking out of the back of it, he looks comical. But aside from the bad mask, I think he's actually a pretty believable older version of the original Leatherface, if not a fantastic one. The lawyer explains to this movie's final girl, Heather, that the reason why Leatherface is chasing her so persistently is because the last time a girl got away from him, nearly all of his family were killed, and how he just doesn't know any better. But we do also see that this Leatherface isn't just killing for food and for survival. This Leatherface is killing as an act of revenge because of what happened to his family, and we see him keep score of his actions by scratching out the faces of the men on the newspaper photograph. In fourth place is actually going to be the Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of this movie, but I will say that it had a pretty solid version of Leatherface. This is another version of Old Man Leatherface, just like we saw in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. What I think they do well in this movie is how they show that Leatherface is a figure of days gone by. He is a man stuck in the past and doesn't really have a place in this more modern world. This Leatherface does maintain a lot of the characteristics of the original Leatherface. He is still mentally inept and has that man-child quality to him, and he's also still distressed by the idea of outsiders coming into his world. And I think that he has a really solid look as well. The actor who portrays him, Mark Burnham, has the same height as Gunnar Hansen, so he's maintaining that intimidating height and stance, and he's also still rocking that what I call workerman look with the shabby shirts and trousers. There are a few differences to this character though, and one of them being that this is the first time we see him make a face mask out of love and as an act of tribute to somebody that he cares about. He's also absolutely brutal in this movie and has a bit of a sadistic side to him as well. He plans and traps and makes sure that his victims suffer as much as they possibly can do. There's honestly not that much between this old man version of Leatherface and Old Man Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. We see them both learn how to plan and how they kill not just for survival, but honestly I think the reason why this one is higher in the list is just because I'm much more of a fan of the look of him. In third place, it's the Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre The Beginning. So The Beginning acts as a direct prequel to the 2003 remake and gives us another continuity change and another origin story to Leatherface. In this movie, Leatherface's real name is Thomas Hewitt, and we see medical records showing that he's been diagnosed with having neurodegeneration and also skin conditions that cause deformities on his face. This has led to a lot of bullying and cruelty from other people within the movie, and in the movie we actually hear people call Leatherface a creature, an animal, and they even call him the R word. In the beginning, Leatherface is still manipulated by his family, but he's also protected by them, and you see that they are much less abusive to him as well. His Uncle Charlie actually describes that the boy is just misunderstood when the sheriff is calling him names, and he says that he likes his new face when Leatherface shows that he's made himself a skin mask. It's actually his Uncle Charlie who manipulates Leatherface into transferring the skills that he learnt at the slaughterhouse onto killing actual people. And despite there being a lot of anger and a lot of rage in Leatherface due to the bullying he's experienced through life, you can still see a level of hesitation in him when he's first asked to kill somebody with a chainsaw. But he very, very quickly gets a taste for it and remains, in my opinion, along with the remake Leatherface, the scariest version of this character in the whole franchise. I think that his look is interesting in this movie as well. Again, clothes-wise, he's pretty accurate to the original. You've got a lot of the grubby workerman clothes with an apron, but he hasn't started wearing human skin masks at this point. Instead, he covers the lower half of his face with a mask made out of animal skin. So we see a lot more of the man underneath the mask this time. That is until he makes his first human skin mask out of Matt Bomer. Okay, so which of these remaining Leatherfaces made it to my first place in this ranking? In second place, we have the Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake. This is, in my opinion, hands down the scariest Leatherface in the franchise, and I think he definitely has the most intimidating physical presence. I also think that this Leatherface has a really good look to him. Like the original, we see him in his grubby workman clothes, like trousers and shirt and with an apron, so it makes sense and fits into the lifestyle that he has. Gone are the days of the permed mullet and camo shirt. And I think that this face mask is really good as well. I think that there's something really scary about it because it looks almost inhuman despite it being a human face. And I think that's because it's really old and worn in, But I do also like it when Leatherface gets his new face mask that he makes from Kemper, and I think that that whole scene is really effective and really haunting, especially as it's shot with the feathers floating around him that gives it an element of beauty, but also when you see the heartbreaking realisation on the movie's final girl Erin's face as well. As I said in the beginning, we do see medical records explaining that Leatherface has a skin condition. This was also alluded to in the remake movie, as we see Leatherface remove his mask and we see the face underneath and he's actually missing his nose. So in these movies, the reason for Leatherface wearing a mask is A, because he wants to cover up his own deformities, but B, because he wants to have a face that he actually likes. Just as in the beginning, in the remake, Leatherface is not really bullied or pushed around by his family, but is rather protected by them, and his mother, Luda May, actually cites it as one of the reasons for them attacking people in order to keep her son protected from the cruel outsiders. In the remake, it's only ever alluded to that the Hewitts actually eat the humans that they kill, but like in the original, they have lost their jobs due to the closure of the slaughterhouse, which is explained more in the beginning, and so their actions still have a level of necessity and drive for survival. Another little detail that I like about this Leatherface is that in this film, we actually see him sewing and stitching his face masks and prepping the human flesh with salt and brown paper. They're just little details, but I enjoy them because we don't see them that often throughout the other movies. And of course, through process of elimination, in first place, it is the original Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974. As much as I think the remake's Leatherface is absolutely terrifying, I do believe that the original Leatherface is the best one that we have had in the franchise. What stands out to me the most about this Leatherface in the original is how he is a man-child, how he has this childlike quality to him, and even though he's a huge presence of a man, he is both physically and verbally pushed around by his family members. What's also interesting about the original film is that it's very clear that Leatherface is a victim himself. He's a victim of familial bullying from his family members, but both Leatherface and his family are victims of industrial capitalism and mechanical advances. Because of advances in the slaughterhouse, they have lost their jobs, and so they now have no money to feed themselves. So their actions come from desperation. It comes from a need to survive. This Leatherface is also portrayed as quite a sensitive person. He becomes very distressed when the young adults from the outside world come into his home. He does seem very scared by the outside world. But despite having a level of sympathy to him and being a victim of certain circumstances, do not be misled. This is still a very dangerous and intimidating killer. This Leatherface has no issue with very quickly killing and eating human beings. And this Leatherface, hands down, has one of the most startling and iconic introduction in horror movie history. So there you have it, guys, my ranking of all 9 Leatherfaces from the entire Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. If you're a fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, then don't forget to check out my other episodes, the review of the original movie and the review of the brand new 2022 release. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave me your ranking of this iconic horror villain. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye, guys.